try and get as much of your thumb on the ball as you can, because more surface area on the ball equals more revolutions, basically. Sort of good markers for me are driving through with my back leg, making sure that I'm sort of getting through my action and spending time on my front foot, both of which create enough time for you to get through your action, for all the components and the biomechanics of your bowling action to happen. The more relaxed your hand is, the lighter your grip is with the ball, I think gives you more control, gives you more revolutions. I quite enjoy getting hit out the park, because it means that unless a batter's milking me for 5 singles and then hitting me out the park, that's a different story. But if I'm going for 6 and over or 7 and over, and one of those balls is going for 6, it means that the batter doesn't really have a plan.
Cricket Life Stories with me, Neil Kagram. Today we're joined by Simon Harmer. Simon, how's it going out in South Africa at the moment?
Hi Neil, thank you for having me. Yeah, all good. Back in South Africa, got a full summer of cricket ahead of me. So just sort of starting to settle in. We're in a bubble at the moment in Kimberley. We've got some cricket on the go here. So yeah, not a hell of a lot happening, but hopefully some more cricket this week.
Oh, the weather sounds good out there anyway. So Simon, we're going to talk through the mindset side of spin bowling. We're going to give some tips and advice for young budding cricketers in this chat. We're just setting the scene. You're obviously one of the great county spin bowlers in the UK. You played Test cricket for South Africa. Just setting the scene. When did you first get into spin bowling?
I grew up bowling probably medium pace at best. I think I was quite big for my age, if I can put it that way. So when I was younger, I could probably bully guys my age. But as I started to move through the age groups and everybody caught up, I definitely became a medium pacer, struggling to get overs in, probably more of a batter than a bowler. And it was probably when I was about 15, bowling to one of my coaches in the nets after practice at school one day. And he obviously saw a few things that he liked, and he said, why don't you give this a go on the weekend? So I'd say 15 was when I started probably taking spin bowling seriously. It was obviously very natural to me, coming from like a seam bowling background. I didn't really overthink it, which probably helped me. And yeah, as I said, I was more of a batter than I was a bowler, but I always want to try and find ways to contribute, whether it be in the field or with ball in hand. So yeah, that's kind of my initial journey into off spin.
From a spin bowling mindset perspective, does it all start at practice? What does your preparation consist of a few days leading up to a game?
I think it depends where you are in the season. I had a back injury during the county season this year, and I wasn't able to train during the T20 competition and then into the back end of the 4-day stuff. So I couldn't put any overs in. I could literally play, and I had probably arguably one of my best white ball campaigns of my career off the back of not doing any practice. So I think there's a balance between best when fresh and obviously getting the right amount of overs under the belt to feel prepared enough going into a game. I think as I can only speak for myself, but I think mentally, if I'm in a place where I feel like I've ticked all the boxes, I've trained, I've put the overs in and I'm feeling good going into a match, I'm probably in a better space than if I'm thinking, sure, I probably could have bowled a little bit more this week. So I really think it depends where in the season you are. Obviously in the off season, you're going to look to do more technical stuff. But I like to try and start my training sessions with sort of one step, very basic stuff, trying to focus on very technical aspects And then when I go back into a full run, to try and just sort of worry more about the result and the feel than any like real technical stuff.
Yes, you mentioned the technical stuff. Is that to do, are you talking about the bowling action? Is it important to think about the biomechanics of the action? Is that something that's running through your head during the this training that you're talking about?
Yeah, so when I'm doing one-step drills, I'm probably working on driving forward with my head, like things that are relevant to me that I find. I've got probably a checklist of 3 things that if it's not happening for me, if I'm not getting the shape on the ball, it's not landing where I want it to be. It's one of probably 3 things. Driving my head towards the target. What that creates is that your everything's working towards the target, and that your arms are moving forward towards the target. When your head is sort of slightly back in your action, your arms tend to swing across your body, and that's when you'll tend to miss either wide on the offside or maybe down leg. Another thing would be trying to spend as much time on my front foot as possible. So you can package that in a few ways, but that's probably pivoting for longer, or however you want to sort of word it. But for me, it's just thinking about spending as much time on my front foot as I can, so that I can get through my action. If I'm too quick through the crease, then I don't really get the revs, or the dip on the ball, which is an off spinner, is vital. And then from there, probably making sure that my left arm is working. I can sometimes get a bit lazy with my left arm, just making sure that I'm not pulling down too early and that I'm getting sort of a full rotation, if I can call it that, with that left arm really working towards the target. So that's kind of what I'll start off with. I'll feel where I am. And if it feels pretty good from there, then I'll just try and maybe work on driving through with my back leg, try and sort of do, say, 10, 15 minutes of real technical stuff to make sure that I'm sort of progressing, that I'm not sort of regressing, if anything. And then from there to go into a full run where it's probably not technical at all.
If a youngster perhaps is struggling to spin the ball as much as they want, is there one component in the action that you would suggest that they should focus on, or is it literally down to each individual and it's a package of the whole action coming together that enables a spinner to spin the ball, get the revs, etc.?
I think there are some technical aspects that you can probably work on, but I'm a firm believer that as pace bowlers, you can either bowl 90 miles plus an hour. A spinner, you can either spin it or you can't. To teach somebody who can't spin the ball to spin the ball, I think is pretty difficult. But sort of good markers for me are driving through with my back leg, making sure that I'm sort of getting through my action and spending time on my front foot, both of which create enough time for you to get through your action, for all the components and the biomechanics of your bowling action to happen. And also you obviously want the ball to spend as much time on your fingers as you possibly can. So by doing that, it helps with that as well.
There's a lot of talk about the grip. What grips do you take? And for, again, a youngster that perhaps doesn't have a clue where to start, what advice would you give them on that aspect?
I think the most frustrating sort of watershed moment for me, I went to India to work with a coach called Umesh Patwal, who I sort of confide in. He's my go-to guy. And I had like all these probably then preconceived ideas as to like what spin bowling was, how I needed to turn the ball more, how to get more control. And he basically laughed it off and said, like, that is all nonsense. And I was on the verge of tears because it was that frustrating that all these things that I thought I knew, I didn't know. And I had to not start again, but he basically retaught me just some fundamental stuff. And on the grip, I think when the wicket is turning, or when a spin bowler wants to turn the ball, they immediately try and sort of grip the ball harder, more pressure, that white knuckle kind of thing, to try and force more spin or more revs onto the ball, where it's completely the other way around. The more relaxed your hand is, the lighter your grip is with the ball, I think gives you more control, gives you more revolutions. It allows, it's the same as a batter. If a batter's tense with his arms like that, he's never going to be able to swing through. And it's the same as a bowler. If you tense and really, really trying to spin the ball, that's when everything really goes wrong. And the other sort of thing for me, with especially with off spinners, is that thumb on the ball. A lot of spinners hold the ball like almost in the palm of their hand with their thumb off the ball. I would say try and get as much of your thumb on the ball as you can, because more surface area on the ball equals more revolutions, basically.
What are your approaches then when it comes to subtle variations? Are you of the mindset that it should be the stop ball 90% of the time, set a batsman up that way? What are your views on that subject?
Yeah, I think you need to nail your stock ball. You can't look at bowling variations when you can't land your stock ball, I'd say 95 out of 100 times. Because once you've got that control, you can then start to play with the batter. But if you want to try and start setting up the batter and you don't have the control to either start or go back to your stock ball, say after a variation, then it kind of doesn't really help you. I think for me, yeah, subtle variations, trying to set up a batter. I think the biggest challenge is on a turning wicket to bowl one that doesn't turn, and on a wicket that isn't turning to try and get one to turn. Or so, like, I mean, there's a million different variations, but it's obviously very dependent on the wicket, the batters that you're bowling to. But yeah, I think for me, like basic stuff would be having the ability to try and bowl a ball with the exact same action, same arm speed as my stock delivery, but then one that doesn't turn. Obviously, you want the seam position to be very similar in the air. You don't want the batter to pick it up in the air. You've got to try and force them to sort of wait as late as possible in order for them to see a variation or to completely fox them. And yeah.
During a game situation, again, from a mindset perspective, is it important to focus on what you want to implement in terms of your own bowling plans, or should you be reacting to what the batsman's doing? What is your mindset when it comes to that?
I think you've got to do your homework on a batter, especially in professional sports. It's obviously a lot easier than in amateur sport, because like I've got all the tools to do homework on batters that I'll be playing against tomorrow. But I think as you sort of start to play the game and know what to look for, you can sum up pretty quickly. And batters generally show you what they're going to do in the first sort of 6 to 10 balls that you bowl them. If they're going to sweep, if they're going to use their feet, if they're going to reverse, etc., etc. So it's like walking into a room of people that you've never met before. Like slowly but surely you start to work out who's there, how many people, what the audience is. It's exact same with spin bowling. You're constantly picking up information while you're bowling. What speed's working? Is it quicker? Is it slower? What is my stock today? Is my stock quick? Is it slow? And the same in terms of the batters. If they're looking to use their feet, am I then going to look to bowl from the back of the crease? Because as a bowler, you kind of get like this instinctive feeling when something's going to happen. So to play with variations like that and to try and work out as quickly as possible what's working and what the batters are looking to try and do. Not to make it too long-winded, but I think on turning wickets, it's a lot easier to score square, and on non-turning wickets, it's a lot easier to score straight. So I always think to myself, what is the most difficult shot for the batter? Is it forcing him to play square on a straight wicket? So maybe moving my mid-wicket straighter and leaving, not having a deep square and forcing him to sweep. And then the opposite on a turning wicket is trying to force him to play straight. Take away his option square of the wicket, force him to hit me down the ground. And if one does turn, it then brings in my boxman mid-wicket, etc., etc.
You mentioned pace there. What does finding the right pace as a spin bowler actually mean?
Well, different surfaces react differently, and I think finding the right pace is firstly, it's different to batters. Some batters prefer pace on the ball. Somebody like Owen Morgan, very strong square of the wicket. If you give him too much pace to work with, he can hurt you and he can manipulate the ball in a lot of different places. So it's probably the stock pace to him is probably a little bit slower, whereas to somebody else, it might be a little bit quicker. Somebody who looks to use their feet, forcing them to stay in their crease a little bit more. So in terms of pace, again, it's very surface dependent, something that you need to sort of work out really quickly. But for me, it's being able to keep the batter in his crease and then also not bowling to his strengths.
For a young player that's perhaps struggling to adapt across different formats, the longer form red ball, and then switching to the shorter form white ball game as a spinner, what advice would you give them? As much as formats change and dictate how probably you structure your over, I don't think, I mean, your length might change by a meter, maybe not even as much as that, half a meter, from a 4-day length to a T20 length. But I think the biggest thing for me is you move from 4-day cricket into 2020 cricket, and I think everybody needs to understand that all bowlers struggle, especially in a county season where I think in the last 3 years we've probably had 2 or 3 days max between finishing a 4-day game and then moving into a 2020 game. And it does take you a while to adapt, even the best players in the world. So like young spinners mustn't be too hard on themselves. Give yourself a break and allow yourself time to adapt. The better you get, the more you practice, the shorter that time period will become. But I think for me, early on in my career, when I moved from 4-day cricket to 2020 cricket, I used to bowl incredibly quickly in 2020 cricket. And I think it made, especially in South Africa where the wickets are better, it made it easier for the batters to get after me with that quicker pace. And one thing that I've learned as I've got on is that I need to trust the shape that I put on the ball, because I do get the ball to sort of drift and dip. But if I'm bowling too quickly, I take away my biggest weapon. So for me, it's just been being confident and trusting myself that the slower pace is the right pace. And if a batter gets hold of me, it's 2020 cricket, it's going to happen. It's a performance-based sport. So I'm going to have good days and I'm going to have bad days. So I think young spinners out there is probably just don't be too hard on yourself. And at times, from a tactical and a mindset perspective, again, when the ball is not spinning, what are your general approaches when you face us with a surface like that?
I think what happens in the air is then very important. You need to be able to get the ball to drift and dip, because if you're not getting any assistance off the wicket, what happens between the ball leaving your hand and hitting the wicket is probably going to be the most important part. And then also just playing around with bowling over and bowling around to right-hand batters. I think from around the wicket, you probably bring in more modes of dismissal, because if one does sort of grip or just turn slightly, which is half a bat, you then bring in LBW. If it slides on, there's still the nick-off chance. So yeah, I think you've just got to be open to sort of trying and feeling different things, experiment with coming around the wicket, and then just really focusing on, you probably have to be a little bit more technical on a flatter wicket in terms of your biomechanics to make sure that you're getting the right shape in the air.
And then on the flip side, when the ball is spinning and ragging square, is it all about embracing that pressure of your team almost expecting you to deliver?
Yeah, I think, again, the more inexperienced you are, the more you probably sort of tense up and you try too hard. The biggest thing for me is when I'm relaxed, I'm bowling well. And I think when the ball is turning, the biggest thing is just making sure that you're getting as many balls in the right area as you possibly can. Not trying to get too carried away with too many variations, just making sure that you are relentless, asking the batter the same question ball after ball, because if it is turning, one of those balls is going to have his name on it.
And then it happens to the best bowlers, best spinners in the world, getting hit out the park. If it's happening to a youngster, on a weekly basis? Is it all about that determination to keep coming back, believe in your skills? What advice would you give a young player?
Yeah, I think it's mentally it is going to be a challenge to sort of keep coming back. But the biggest, I quite enjoy getting hit out the park because it means that unless a batter's milking me for 5 singles and then hitting me out the park, that's a different story. But if I'm going for 6 and over or 7 and over, and one of those balls is going for 6, it means that the batter doesn't really have a plan. He's not trusting his defense. He's either looking to take a risk and a boundary option, or he's shutting up shop. So, which means that I'm still in the game, because there's not a lot of batters in the world that can sort of strike the ball cleanly 10 out of 10 times. They're going to make a mistake somewhere along the line. So I think it's just trusting yourself again, understanding that the batter's also under pressure, even though the ball might be flying around. If you're getting the ball in the right area. And look, if it's not your day, it's not your day. Go back to the nets, work on what you think didn't go right and come back stronger. Like I said, it's a performance-based sport. You're going to have days where you bowl badly and take wickets, and you're going to have days where you bowl well and the Knicks go for 4 and catches don't go to hand. It's why we love the great game.
And then talk about field settings. When you come on to bowl in whatever format, do you have one that's preset in your mind that you like to have in your first over, for example, and then adapt as it goes along? And is it important, again, to have that flexibility to adapt and against the, whatever batsman you're bowling to, almost setting them up? Again, can you give us a little insight in your mindset when it comes to field settings in amongst your plan?
So I really enjoy the leg slip. If I miss, I normally miss straight. And so instead of that shot just being like an easy single to a 45 or whatever the case is, all of a sudden there's an element of risk now because there's the leg slip, and it changes the way that the batter tends to play that ball. And then, yeah, I think you can definitely set batters up, keeping your mid-on up, which generally an off-spinner would have back on the boundary straight away. Start with him up and say to the batter, I'm happy for you to hit me back over my head, but if you get it wrong, you're gone. And then Shane Warne always used to say, attacking bowling, defensive fields, defensive bowling, attacking fields. And I think it's quite important that, I mean, on a turning wicket, if I'm throwing the ball outside of stump to try and still hit the stumps, it obviously allows the batter to free his arms, which probably brings in a slog sweep. And if I don't have a cow out there, then mentally I'm not going to commit to that ball as much as I would if I had the protection there. So you want to give yourself the protection in order to get the ball in the right place. And the other thing is, at the start of your spell, especially for young spinners, don't chase your spell. Give yourself the protection at the start, maybe. So if you want to drop a sweeper out because you might drag it short and get cut, it's only 1, it's not 4. But if you have all the fielders up to start, you bowl 2 bad balls, you're still warming up, you go for 8 in your first over, and then you're kind of trying to play catch-up for the rest of your spell, rather than your 2 bad balls go for 2 singles, your over goes for 2, and then you can start to sort of build on your confidence. So I think give yourself the protection at the start, and then you can start tweaking fielders, bringing fielders in once you're confident enough landing the ball where you want it to be.
Simon, it's been a fascinating insight. Just to end on, again, if a young player came to you for your best piece of spin bowling advice, what would you tell them?
That's a good question. I think it probably boils down to how badly you want it. What are you willing? There's the cliched saying is, if you want something that you've never had, you've got to do something that you've never done. And I think for young spinners that are chasing the dream of playing international cricket or just professional cricket, it boils down to the sacrifices, the hard work that you're willing to put in order to sort of reap the rewards later down the line. So I think my biggest thing for them would be, don't be shy of hard work.
Simon, perfect. Thank you again for your time. Really appreciate it, and all the best for the weeks ahead.
Neil, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
So Neil Kagram, Cricket Life Stories, Simon Harmer, thank you.